de Janeiro, up on the top, the one that bird in Rio smacked into, right? Truth is at the top. It's Christ himself. And there are many ways around the hill, right? And I love to listen to testimonies that are really, really strange and shocking and unexpected, right? Think about it. My favorite Christmas story is the story of the Magi. Who were the Magi? They obviously weren't Christians, but they weren't Jews either. Most people think they were Zoroastrians coming from Persia. And they did not have the Torah. They did not have the revelation God gave to the Jews. All they had was their limited wisdom. They studied the stars. They followed the star, and where did it lead them? It led them to the Christ child. Now, when they got to the child, they could have said this: "You have got to be kidding me. We came, the kid just dirtied his diaper. I'm going home, and I will never follow another stupid star." And that's what some people say even today. But that's not what the Magi say. You know what the Magi said? They said, "Yes, this is what I have been seeking all my life. I never could have guessed it, but now that I'm here, I recognize that this is the truth I've been yearning for." St. Paul goes to the Areopagus, Mars Hill, right? Well, first he goes to the Agora in Athens. This is Acts chapter 17. And as he looks around, he notices that the Athenians have an idol to every single god. Someone once said it's easier to find a god than a man in Athens. He even noticed that there was a temple to an unknown god. Well, St. Paul looked at that, and then, because he had listened to my lecture, he said, "I know what to do." He went up to the Areopagus, Mars Hill, where it used to be the government, but now it was where the Stoic and Epicurean philosophers would meet and vet the new ideas and see whether they wanted to allow them in. And he gathered them together and he said, "Men of Athens," which is the way Socrates began all of his speeches. He said, "Men of Athens, I can see that in all ways you are a religious people. For I see that you have a temple." He didn't say idol, he was trying to make a connection. "I see that you have a temple to every single god. I even see that you have a temple to an unknown God." And then Paul said the words that I believe the entire ancient world was waiting to hear. My relatives all go back to Greece. I believe that all the Greeks and the Romans too were waiting to hear this. He said, "Now, therefore, what you have worshipped in ignorance, I will proclaim to you as known. God does not dwell in temples built by human hands, but out of one man he created all races of men. He set their times and locations so that they might reach after him and grope after him, though he is not far from any of them. For in him we live and move and have our being. As your own poets have said, we are his offspring." A lot of people don't understand. Paul is actually quoting two different pagan poets. One Greek pagan poet named Epimenides said, "In him we live and move and have our being." Another one named Aratus or Cleanthes said, "We are his offspring." He is quoting two pagan poets as authorities, pointing towards the higher truth. And he went on to speak to them about the resurrection. So he tried to find their desire and he tried to make a connection to it. Am I out of time? How am I doing here, Angelo?
No, that's fine.
If you want me, okay. Let me say one more thing here, and then I've got a little dramatic thing. Right? We're going to do Ulysses. We'll do that in a second. But let me mention. It's not in my handout, but I want to mention because this is something that sort of came to me, and as far as I know, I haven't heard anybody else say this, and I can't prove it to you, but I'm going to try to convince you that I believe that there is a place in the Gospels where Jesus himself does what Paul is doing. In other words, make a connection to pagan people, presenting himself as the fulfillment of their pagan desires. It comes in John chapter 11. It is Jesus' last public appearance and last public discourse. And if you remember that, there are it's the Passover, so there are people from all over the place, and there are some Greeks there. And the Greeks go to Philip and say, "We would like to see Jesus." And they go to Jesus and say, "Jesus, there are some Greeks who would like to see you." And Jesus says these words. He says, "The time has come, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified." And then he says those beautiful words, "Except a grain of wheat fall into the ground and die, it will remain a single seed. But if it dies, it will bear much fruit." Now, I wonder if any of you have really thought about that. By the way, that's the epigraph to the Brothers Karamazov. If you've ever thought about that phrase. Because that image of the seed that dies and is reborn is not a Jewish metaphor. You can search the Old Testament. You're not going to find that metaphor. It doesn't even appear in the New Testament except for 1 Corinthians 15 about the resurrection body, but that's written to Corinth, which is a Greek city. All right, let me make my argument here. The Bible does not tell us who these Greeks are, but they are obviously Greeks who are interested in cultic practices and are open to learning deeper truths. Well, the oldest cult in the Greek world was called the Eleusinian Mysteries. Very, very old, very, very secretive. We don't even know that much about it because they were so secretive. But we do know that they worshiped Demeter and Persephone, the mother and the maid, which is the origin of the cycle of nature, and they also worshiped Dionysus. And we have pretty good evidence that on their altar they would put a ripe ear of grain, a ripe ear of wheat, that they worshipped in some way or another the mystery religions of the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Now, I can't prove that's who the Greeks are, but if that's where the Greeks are come from, Jesus has spoken their language. Gentlemen, you know that seed that you've been worshiping that dies and is reborn, I am that seed. Why else would he say that? He doesn't say anything else like that in the Gospels. It's not a Jewish metaphor. I think he is speaking to the Greeks and saying, I am fulfilling your mysteries as well. I am the true corn king. By the way, if you're a fan of Stephen King, he very cleverly wrote a book called Children of the Corn. But it's actually corn, you see? But it is a story of the corn king. But it's very, very violent. It's a pagan group that's taking over and doing human sacrifice and things like that. And, wow, okay, go to Astoria, watch out. Anyway, that's where the Greeks are from, Astoria. So. Anyway, okay, I'm going to end with a little fun. We don't have time for Q&A, but we talked about the journey of desire. And in the beginning, we were thinking about doing a talk on Dante and Ulysses' desire in Dante. But I said, Angelo, Ulysses isn't hell. He's really not giving us good advice, even though I love that scene, okay? But there is another poem about Ulysses that was inspired by Dante, but it's by Alfred Lord Tennyson. And the poem is called Ulysses, which is, of course, the Latin name Odysseus, the Latin version of the name Odysseus. And in this wonderful poem that I'm going to end reciting it, because it's a poem that captures the yearning, the desire for something beyond. Now, in this poem, Odysseus has returned home. He's been gone for 20 years. He's returned home to his wife Penelope and his son Telemachus. 20 years have passed by. And in the poem, 3 years have gone by since he got home. In the poem, you'll hear me say 3 sons, right? 3 years or 3 sons. 3 years have gone by, and Odysseus, Ulysses, is restless. He needs to move on again. There is a burning desire in him to, as you'll see, follow knowledge like a sinking star. Now, the poem falls into 3 parts. The first part, Ulysses is speaking to us and he's trying to explain to us why he must leave. Why Ithaca has gotten too small. Ithaca, New York. Let's leave Cornell and come to Columbia, right? Why Ithaca has gotten too small and he needs to move on. He's going to explain that to us. Then there's a brief middle section where he sort of passes the baton to his son Telemachus to leave the monarchy to him, so he can go on. And then the final section, imagine Ulysses at the shore calling on his mariners to go on one last voyage of discovery and adventure. So I hope this will inspire us. It little profits that an idle king by this still hearth among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife, I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race that hoard and sleep and feed and know not me. I cannot rest from travel. All times have I enjoyed greatly, have suffered greatly, both with those that love me and alone, on shore and when through scudding drifts the rainy Hyades vex the dim sea. I am become a name, for always roaming with a hungry heart. Much have I seen and known, cities of men and manners, councils, climates, governments, myself not least, but honored of them all, and drunk delight of battle with my peers, far on the ringing plains of windy Troy. I am a part of all that I have met, yet all experience is an arch, where through gleams that untraveled world, whose margin fades forever and forever as I move. How dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life, life piled on life were all too little, and of one to me little remains. But every hour that is saved from that eternal silence, something more, a bringer of new things. And vile it were for some 3 suns to store and hoard myself, and this gray spirit yearning in desire to follow knowledge like a sinking star beyond the utmost bounds of human thought. This is my son, mine own Telemachus, to whom I leave the scepter and the isle, well loved of me, discerning to fulfill his duties, by slow prudence to make mild a rugged people, and by soft degrees subdue them to the useful and the good. Most blameless is he, centered in the sphere of common duties, decent not to fail in offices of tenderness, and pay meet adoration to my household gods when I am gone. He works his work, I mine. There lies the port. The vessel puffs her sail. My mariners, souls that have toiled and wrought and fought with me, that ever with a frolic welcome took the thunder and the sunshine, and opposed free hearts, free foreheads. You and I are old. Old age hath yet his honor and his toil. Death closes all, but something ere the end, some work of noble note may yet be done, not unbecoming men that strove with gods. The lights begin to twinkle from the rocks. The long day wanes. The slow moon climbs. The deep moans round with many voices. Come, my friends, 'tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off, and sitting well in order strike the sounding furrows, for my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the baths of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be that we will touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we knew. Though much is taken, much abides. And though we are not now that strength which in old days moved earth and heaven, that which we are one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will, to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield.